Hi, it's Lee, and welcome to the Tesla Economist. It seems that demand is very much a subject on a lot of investors' minds. So we'll keep going through how I see demand playing out. In a recent video, I talked about how Tesla shouldn't have any trouble finding demand for increased supply, as the additional supply is the Model Y from the new factories. To summarize, the new manufacturing processes reduced cost significantly, meaning Tesla can still sell all these additional cars at a decent margin. This is just for the Model Y though, a model that Elon thinks he can sell perhaps 3 to 4 million a year just as an EV, possibly a lot more when it's an AV. Now, the crossover SUV category of vehicle is obviously highly popular among consumers. However, the price bracket between 30 and 40,000 is even more popular. And everywhere, essentially, lower priced vehicles have more demand, obviously. The Model Y in the US is likely going to be above $60,000, even the 4680 version, and especially with the tax credits. Alright, so that's all good. There'll be enough demand for the Model Y one way or another. But this $30,000 to $40,000 price bracket is huge. So we need a $30,000 car to compete in there. Well, that's actually a $30,000 price point for an ICE vehicle. So one could be forgiven for thinking that a $35,000 electric car would be the equivalent of a $30,000 ICE car, given the massive savings you get from electric, along with all the benefits, and of course, if it happens to be a Tesla, a plethora of standard features that you would unlikely ever see on a $30,000 ICE car. Well, some you wouldn't even see on a $100,000 ICE car. So if Tesla can hit this price point of $35,000 in the US, might we assume that maybe it could have even more demand than electric crossover SUV? I understand these are not mutually exclusive market segments, but the Model Y isn't hitting this price point and is simply not affordable for a large part of the market. And according to Elon, the rear-wheel drive version doesn't have sufficient range for the US market. Therefore, Model Y may always be around this $60,000 price point, possibly lower over time, perhaps closer down to where it used to be, maybe low 50s, but still not near the mid-30s. Elon did also say that the Model Y would be the best-selling car in the world, although that is global sales, which does also include the rear-wheel drive version, which, by the way, is for sale in China now for under $43,000. Anyway, that car isn't coming to the US. Not needed. There's plenty of demand for a lower-cost Model Y elsewhere. The US consumers want more range and can afford to pay more because they get a $7,500 discount. So plenty of demand for the longer range versions. I do expect, however, Tesla will eventually upgrade the Model Y factory in Shanghai too to also have front and rear castings and a structural battery pack, but probably not likely until 2024 or later. It would likely mean that they could then get the price to potentially below $40,000 in China. Anyway, you get the idea. Tesla want to ramp up a lot, but there aren't any new models coming for some time, aside from the Cybertruck. But that certainly won't be in the $30,000 price range. As in, there is no compact coming anytime soon. If all hands were on deck and they started building factories for it tomorrow, they probably wouldn't hit volume production for a compact for at least a couple of years anyway, possibly sooner in China, but either way, not hitting that low price point soon or through the recession. Alright, it's obvious where I'm headed here. Tesla will need to ramp up the Model 3 too, but the price is still too high. Even the rear-wheel drive version from Shanghai, the lowest cost Tesla produced in the world currently, likely couldn't get that much more demand at the current price point, and certainly likely not enough if they doubled supply. They would have to reduce the price for demand to meet that much supply, which then starts to really affect margin. The only way around this is to reduce the cost of producing the Model 3. Of course, these Model 3 factories are practically at capacity now, so it's really hard to think about doubling production. Also, where would they get that many cells from? Well, perhaps from the new 80 gigawatt hour factory up the road in Shanghai that CATL should have their first phase online next quarter. Yes, use CATL structural battery packs with front and rear castings in the Model 3, and then you reduce the cost low enough that you can pass that cost saving to the consumer, low enough to double demand if you double supply, and you still get the same gross profit per vehicle sold. I'm not saying the same profit margins, only at a lower price. I'm saying the same amount of actual dollars in profit per car sold as you've reduced the costs. Actually, the margin would end up going up. And Tesla may not even need to pass on all those savings to the consumer. I estimate it could be as much as $5,000 saving in production for the new Model 3, with 5 more years of engineering and manufacturing know-how, along with lower cost sales since the last Model 3. However, it would also likely be a longer range vehicle too. Even if Tesla used a structural battery pack the same size as the current pack with M3P cells and all the other advances we would expect the range to increase a noticeable amount. And I might be totally wrong about Tesla using M3P cells in a Model 3 in Fremont though. This revamp we're talking about might end up being new 4680 lines coming to Fremont too. That would be an even bigger deal. It would imply that Tesla are able to rinse and repeat these production lines once they have them figured out. And that's the real bottleneck to the growth of this business. How quickly can Tesla replicate 4680 lines? Every kilowatt hour of cell they can produce is worth about $400 gross profit, especially when you include the subsidies in the US. Tesla know the US is the market. Demand is massive thanks to the government, and battery subsidies make it even better. Imagine that in the US, in Fremont, new manufacturing processes, perhaps getting the Model 3 to 500,000 units a year, or maybe even 1 million units, which may require removing the Model Y line in Fremont too. This is why Tesla can keep increasing their supply so much, because they have new manufacturing techniques they aren't even utilizing yet. They may need to wait for the gigacasting machines to be made first too, and a few other factors until they're ready. Either way, you end up with a longer range, better driving, handling, performing vehicle at a lower cost to produce. Tesla have already had a $35,000 Model 3. If they can save this additional money since then and improve the range and likely performance, then they could very well get back to that price again. Although there is a likely chance that Tesla will find a way for it to be eligible for a $7,500 tax credit too, so they could sell them for $42,500 and still hit that $35,000 price point. Also, more consumers are willing to pay or stretch their budgets to $35,000 for a vehicle when it actually costs $42,000, and they're getting this exclusive massive discount. It just feels like better value psychologically, meaning they are willing to cut back on expenses somewhere else more so. As in perhaps they were previously looking at spending $30,000 for a car, but if they now spend this additional $5,000, they get a car that essentially costs $12,500 more due to this tax credit. Everyone realizes this is coming out of taxpayer money, I mean literally their own tax, and probably feel entitled to make sure they get their discount as everyone else is getting theirs. They don't want to feel left out. We are unsure as to how much this Inflation Reduction Act will really affect demand. Personally, I think it will be absolutely insane. I also think Tesla are aware of this too, hence again why they're going to do this huge Model 3 expansion in Fremont. I'm very excited about this Model 3 Highland. I think it would be amazing for the company to have a vehicle they may be able to produce for perhaps mid to high $20,000. Remember, a vehicle that doesn't need any gas either. Everyone talking about a low-cost Tesla needed to be $25,000 to $30,000 price range, but none of them remotely suggest where the cells for such a car will come from. How about Tesla drop down to a $35,000 price point first, where there actually is sufficient cell supply, as we can see the factories and battery lines being built for them. The supply of these cells should meet the demand for a $35,000 Tesla. Otherwise, Tesla end up with a 2 or 3 year waiting list for a $25,000 to $30,000 Tesla, or inevitably have to raise their prices to $35,000 anyway. I also think that the site that they're creating space for in Berlin, which looks huge by the way, is possibly for a new Model 3 factory. A custom Model 3 Highland factory. By the way, I'm not expecting the Model 3 Highland to look much different from the current Model 3, just some facelifts. I don't think Tesla would do that, as they want to keep the design timeless. In addition to that, they want to maintain economies of scale. If they had to maintain parts from all different versions for the same model, it adds to complexity. Why do you think the Model Y shared so many parts with the Model 3? I wonder if they'll use the same front and rear castings. I would say there's a very good chance that they will use the same front and rear castings. Looking at them, it looks like a possibility. Think of the economies of scale on your 2 best-selling models that are also the 2 best-selling cars on the planet, and they share something like 80% of the same parts. It's an incredible thought. I think Tesla could make $1 million a year in Shanghai if they can already make 800,000 Model Ys, when this is a smaller car with structural pack and front and rear castings. So why not $1 million or even more? And then why not $1 million in Fremont if we remove Model Y line? Then $1 million in Berlin. We could see 3 million Model 3s a year, along with around 3 million Model Ys in production. And then, like I said, the Model Y Shanghai might also get some sort of Highland revamp within time too. Anyway, it will be interesting to see how this all plays out. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.